Welcome to this special edition of the City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The coronavirus crisis is a challenge for all of us, but especially people who are dealing with hunger and poverty in our region. We've talked with a number of different social service agencies. They tell us the COVID crisis has a disproportionate impact on those in need, and the virus is only making their struggles and the efforts to reach out to help them more difficult. So, how can you help or get help yourself? Plus, how are local, state, and federal assistance programs measuring up during this crisis? Well, we are talking with two experts about this in this field to get some answers. We have Christina Wong, who is Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for Northwest Harvest. We also have Gordon McHenry Jr. He is the President and CEO of United Way of King County. Thank you both for joining us. And Christina, I want to start with you here. Northwest Harvest is a hunger relief network. You represent 375 food banks. You've got meal programs, high-need schools you deal with. With major parts of our economy shut down during this pandemic, I have to think the need for food you're dealing with has grown considerably. We actually shot some video recently of people lined up at your community market on 4th Avenue South for free food and meals here in Seattle. I want to talk about where the need for hunger relief is right now, where it's most acutely felt, please.
Thank you, Brian, for having me here today.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. We have seen from our preliminary needs assessment, we estimate that the need for food in our state, we've gone from about 850,000 Washingtonians who struggled before this crisis to put food on their tables to nearly double that at 1.6 million.
Wow.
We are primarily seeing that need. We estimate about 30% of that is actually in South King County and Pierce County. But certainly we have definitely heard from the particularly tribal reservations, federally recognized tribes, that they have seen their grocery stores completely wiped out of food and their food banks struggling to restock their shelves.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that. And Gordon, just going to you here, just putting this in perspective, this is really the first time in a century that our world has had to deal with a crisis at this scale. Many people now may be looking for support from food banks, as we're hearing for the first time, or maybe they were already getting help from free and reduced meal programs at their children's schools. What has United Way of King County seen in terms of increased need for hunger relief, and how do you respond to that in an equitable way?
Sure, Brian, thanks for that question. I agree with Christina. It's just the amount of food insecurity has just grown rapidly in just a very short period of time. A lot of families who have never needed to have support to acquire food are needing it now. And so we see it a lot concentrated in some of the areas that Christina identified, folks who are already living on lower incomes, children who are very much, or students who are dependent upon free and reduced meals and struggling to acquire those meals or to get those meals in a safe way. And then, of course, our communities of color, people who are struggling with housing instability, struggling with poverty, homelessness, very, very challenged to get food, even from the emergency food system.
Right.
So there is an issue of amount of food, there's an issue of distribution, and there's an issue of access. And it is falling, as we are not surprised, on those who are already struggling.
Thank you for that. Christina, I want to move on to the logistics of this, if we could. The food banks you're trying to supply here, we have all seen these stories about how growers, for example, are dumping food during the COVID crisis, problems with meat packing, too. We also have social distancing to consider. That puts a strain on your normal operations, I would have to think. Plus, you've got a lot of volunteers that need to stay home. Many are in that vulnerable age 65 plus category. I want to talk about some of the challenges involved in just getting your work done, doing the outreach that you need to do.
Absolutely. You know, I frequently joke that food banks, it's like we're in the upside down of Stranger Things. We've actually had to revert our model back to, back to the mid 80s, for instance. So much of the work of food banks has converted to the grocery store shopping model experience, just like our Soto community market,
right,
where we want to take away as much stigma as possible and make it feel just like you are in a grocery store. However, because of social distancing requirements, what we've had to revert to is actually pre-packing emergency food boxes with shelf-stable foods instead of those fresh fruits and vegetables that people really not only requested from food banks, but need for health purposes. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's been this disconnect between how we normally have been working with our grower community in order to put that food into our emergency food boxes. That has been the sort of initial stage of the crisis. As people have been sheltering in place and maybe not able to get out as often. We want to make sure that the food that they're given lasts for a long time. What I will say, though, is that there's been tremendous outpouring of support from the community in financial contributions to help us with meeting that, meet some of those challenges of the demands. And also, we're really appreciative of Washington State for making the National Guard available to help us with some of those, replacing some of those core volunteers that we count on, helping us pack those boxes and helping us put those boxes of food into people's hands.
Thanks very much for that. And Gordon, I want to move to you here. The United Way is working on many different fronts with its hunger relief response. You've got food delivery, you've got grocery vouchers, you're even hiring on some people to help out with the summer programs you have ahead. I want you to highlight, if you could, how the United Way is responding, not just here in Seattle, but really countywide with its programs.
Sure. And you mentioned, I think to Christina's point, there's been great collaboration among food preparers, folks who do distribution, nonprofits, and volunteerism. And so what we are doing is being very focused on getting food to the communities most impacted. So one of the examples is the working with great partners like Fair Start, Northwest Harvest, YMCA, Seattle Housing Authority, getting food to the Housing Authority communities. We've started that in the city of Seattle. We've working with the city of Seattle on the voucher program you mentioned, and we're raising money and trying to do the same thing in the rest of the county, getting food to most impacted communities, King County Housing Authority communities, working to get some of the money we've raised to have vouchers available for people who live in the county but don't live in the city of Seattle. So we're making good progress on that and expect to have increased food delivery in the month of May, during the month of May.
And I know you've got some AmeriCorps workers you've transferred to Hunger Corps workers, so a lot of work going on there. I want to try to talk about another piece of this, Christina, and I'll bring you in here, about how different government agencies are responding when it comes to hunger relief here. Christina, as you know, a federal judge recently blocked a Trump administration rule that would have cut 700,000 people from SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. But the Fed's public charge rule did go into effect at the end of February, and this essentially links an immigrant's eligibility for legal status with the likelihood that he or she will rely on public assistance. So I'd like to know, overall, what impact is federal policy having on your work with immigrants and other at-risk populations that you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Public charge, it's been a huge concern, even just from a few years ago when the first rumors of an executive order would come, had been released to the public. And we are definitely seeing that at play now. One of the organizations that we have been working with, similar to what Gordon was saying about trying to get food to people who are not otherwise able to access their food bank or those school meal distribution sites, we've been working with a refugee and asylee resettlement group in South King County. And even though refugees and asylees, the public charge test does not apply to them, this is an example of how that fear that's been instilled, that's making people choose between food and the health and safety and well-being of their families, being concerned that they're putting that they're at risk of being separated from those families if they use public resources. This group has been telling us that most of the households that they serve have cited public charge as a chief concern for why they're not accessing their food bank or their school meal sites. And so we are supplying them with over 360 boxes of food each week in order to make sure that those families don't go hungry.
Thank you very much for that. And I know you're advocating for a lot of this, for a lot of different pieces to this too, but maybe Gordon, I can bring you in on that piece of it. I know you're coordinating resources from the city, county, state, the feds as well here. I want to talk about this. Is this system flexible enough right now to deal with the crisis that we're in, or what changes do you think need to happen when it comes to the government's response to hunger relief?
I think this shows just how fragile our system is, and that we have, as a community, been unwisely overly dependent upon the existing emergency food system, as well as the current free and reduced meals that operate with our school systems. And so it shows when those aren't available or overwhelmed, we have all these people who are hungry. We need to have a much stronger federal partner and a much stronger support system, both emergency and ongoing. And so we have, like Christina said, we're many of the organizations that have been advocating with our delegation, congressional delegation, to put pressure on the federal government to bring more resources into our state and at the same time to work with us to develop a much stronger and much more sustainable and equitable system that really recognizes, we have 1 in 6 people who are hungry, children and youth. Before COVID, we really need to have a much stronger system, and now is the time to do it, even though we're in the midst of a crisis.
Okay, thanks very much. Christina, I'll move on to you here, and I wanted to try to move on to the volunteer piece because I know a lot of people want to try to help. What do you tell people who want to help with the hunger relief effort? Can people do that right now safely, or what do we know about that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think a lot of it depends on your local food bank or food pantry, whether or not they are asking for help from volunteers. National Guard has been deployed again because of food banks were otherwise put in a really hard position.
Yeah.
You need the help to get food out to people, but to ask seniors and people with kids at home to possibly put their health at risk to come in and help distribute. So we've been really grateful that the National Guard has been in place. A lot of programs we have put in place trying to respect those social distancing measures and providing PPE, particularly face masks and gloves as supplies are available. So I think checking in with your local food bank about whether or not they are accepting in-person volunteers is the key. Otherwise, we also certainly suggest that people can help if you are able to with financial contributions to help support food purchasing efforts. And wearing my public policy hat, I will always ask people to check out our website and our advocacy alerts, because we do have some pretty strong priorities on the table for the next COVID relief package, including asking for additional expansions of SNAP benefits and ensuring that there's hazard pay and sufficient PPE for all workers in our food system, be it farm workers, grocery store workers, even food bank staff, and those food processing workers that you had mentioned before.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. Gordon, your thoughts about this? I know we're starting to see the state easing up on some restrictions during this pandemic, but do you think more people will be able to volunteer? Because I know King County, United Way King County has a lot of programs from hunger relief to rental assistance in full swing right now. What are you telling people who really want to help?
We're telling people that volunteerism is important and needed in this time of crisis. It's a great way to actively participate in strengthening our community and responding to the crisis. And to Christina's point, we need to find ways for people to do that that is safe for them and safe for the folks that they are working with. And so on our volunteerism website, we do have some guidelines, and we actually are providing some help to folks who want to volunteer to figure out how they can provide the best resource and keep themselves safe and honor the folks that they're wanting to work with. So we're really encouraging volunteerism, increase that in proportion to the crisis, and that'll make for a better community.
Thanks very much. We need to wrap up the show. 20-second version here. I know it's difficult to look ahead during this time of crisis, but I think it's safe to say the need for hunger relief is only going to grow as this pandemic continues. Some final thoughts about people who need help, people who are in a position to help. Christina, again, 20 seconds, please.
Well, first, I would really like to make sure that people who are newly eligible for SNAP benefits, please do consider applying. DSHS has done a lot to reduce the wait times despite the overwhelming applications, and that takes pressure off of our food bank system. So really would like to encourage that. And then looking forward, Northwest Harvest, we are working with our state partners to make sure that the policies and budget investments are in place, that our economic recovery isn't just a recovery, it's an equitable one.
Thanks for that. Gordon, final thoughts, please. 20 seconds if you can.
Sure. Correct. Crisis is going to be with us for a long period of time. You will find a lot of partners, a lot of collaboration, coordination. We are innovating and adapting as this crisis continues, and all the elements are at play. We need more resources, so people should contribute. We need volunteerism, and we need a lot of advocacy to strengthen the system so it works on the long-term basis. And so just stay connected and be hopeful.
Thank you both very much for your help here. I wanted to make sure I let everybody know who's watching. There are a number of different resources that are available here. Seattle Public Schools, a map of facilities that are turned into food distribution centers. Also, the city of Seattle is mapped out where you can find some local food banks. Finally, if you want to learn more about Northwest Harvest, United Way King County, check out their websites for more information. I'm Brian Callanan. Thank you once again for joining us as our coverage of the coronavirus continues here on Seattle Channel. See you next time.